We are excited about the opportunity to share our knowledge as well as the national landscape on states' efforts to address learning recovery due to interrupted instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for having me here today. I hope everyone is well. My name is Carlos Jameson, and I am a policy researcher at Education Commission of the States. We do our work in a variety of ways through research, publishing reports, hosting convenings, and providing counsel. We research and report on trending education topics and are often invited to talk with groups just like this one to share how states are approaching specific education issues and other ideas for states to consider. I will be using the phrases learning recovery and academic acceleration at various points during this presentation. Term learning recovery is a term used to describe efforts to accelerate student learning due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This term is used instead of learning loss to avoid blaming students for academic declines that resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic. I will be discussing several major topics during this presentation: how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted students, how COVID-19 impacted arts education, and how states have sought to address student recovery from the pandemic. COVID-19 impacted students in a variety of ways. Students experienced declining mental health issues. However, these students' mental health was declining prior to the pandemic, but school closures resulting from the pandemic exacerbated these previously existing issues. Students may feel less connected to their schools, and this may be as a result of fewer meaningful interactions with their teachers and peers. There was increased rates of chronic absenteeism, which is when a student misses at least 10% of the school year. Chronic absenteeism rates increased during the pandemic and have remained above pre-pandemic levels. We also saw declines in student enrollment, which public schools throughout the country generally saw these declines, especially in pre-K and kindergarten, as some parents elected not to enroll their children in these programs in a virtual or hybrid setting. We also saw declines in physical activity. These may have resulted from closures, which decreased access to sports and other recreational activities. And we also saw declines in student academic performance, which I will be discussing in the next slides. So as some research has found, fewer students met grade level proficiency standards on state and national standardized tests in math and English. Students' grade level and content area impacted the extent of these declines in proficiency. We also saw that there were gaps, that pre-existing racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic disparities in standardized test scores were exacerbated during the pandemic. Gaps in standardized test scores grew between students from low-income families and students from more affluent families. Research has also shown that Black and Hispanic, Latino students saw standardized test score gaps increase relative to white students during the pandemic. One factor that may have contributed to widening educational disparities is the homework gap. The homework gap refers to the disproportionate access to broadband internet and internet-connected devices, such as laptops and tablets. We also saw that various student groups are disproportionately impacted by the homework gap, including students from low-income families, students experiencing homelessness, students of color, and students in rural communities. Lack of access to internet-connected devices and broadband internet makes it difficult for students to fully engage in a virtual or hybrid learning environment. This may lead to reduced student engagement for students struggling to access required academic content. This may also lead to increases in chronic absenteeism as some students fall further behind their peers. Likewise, students with individualized education plans, IEPs, were less likely to receive the services required by their plans during virtual instruction. Many students with IEPs also did not receive compensatory services, which are services provided to make up for those that were originally given. As schools began to reopen for in-person instruction, not all students had equal access to full-time in-person instruction. Students in the South were more likely to have access to in-person instruction than students in the Northeast and the West. White students were more likely to have access to in-person instruction than their peers as well. It's important to note that some of the racial disparities in participation in full-time learning are due to parental choice and not solely an issue of schools not offering in-person instruction. Likewise, urban students were less likely to be open full-time than rural schools. States may have also sought to emphasize returning younger students to classrooms, which may explain why they were more likely to receive in-person instruction than their older peers. This section will discuss arts educators' perceptions of how COVID-19 impacted their teaching approaches and curriculum. The following data comes from a survey of arts educators conducted during the spring of 2021. The article that this survey was conducted in is titled "Arts Education in Jeopardy. Research reveals the challenges and resilience of arts education and arts educators during and following the pandemic." Over 80% of arts educators in 2021 reported using technology at least half of the time for their instruction. Arts educators also reported using asynchronous lessons and/or simultaneous instruction with in-person and online instruction happening at the same time. Arts educators also utilize social distancing, masking, prohibitions on sharing equipment, and outdoor spaces to safely conduct in-person arts instruction during the pandemic. When schools reopened, these safety protocols may have altered arts educators' approaches to their lessons as they sought to balance safety with creative and engaging approaches in their instructional practices. Over 40% of arts educators reported students' lack of supplies as an issue. This may result in students being unable to participate or necessitate curriculum reforms to maximize student participation. Over 70% of arts educators reported challenges with level of student engagement, participation, and communication, and physical and/or emotional exhaustion and fatigue. So these show some of the ways that COVID-19 impacted the mental health of students and educators alike. Likewise, more than 60% of arts educators reported struggles with technology, and nearly half of arts educators reported struggles with negative student attitudes about student learning. However, there is some positive news about student recovery and the role that the arts can play in aiding student recovery. Some research has found that there have been some tangible benefits to participating in arts education, such as development of social emotional learning skills. The arts can provide an outlet for students to express their emotions and/or deal with trauma that either occurred during the pandemic or existed prior to the pandemic. And the arts can also increase school engagement for students who are motivated by the arts and are more excited to come to school because they know they have the opportunities to participate in the arts. Finally, I will discuss state approaches and state examples for how they pursued academic acceleration and improving students' mental health. Many of these efforts focus on learning recovery and academic acceleration efforts, as that was a major focus of states and the federal government. States sought to address students' academic and social emotional needs through the following strategies: addressing students' mental health, developing statewide tutoring programs, establishing summer enrichment programs, and expanding access to broadband and technology. However, states have experienced successes and challenges in implementing these measures. Students' mental health is a primary concern for policymakers and school and district leadership during and after the pandemic. Pennsylvania distributed elementary and secondary school emergency relief ESSER funds for school districts, charter schools, and cyber schools for supporting students' social and emotional needs. Washington State enacted legislation requiring school districts to immediately budget and expend learning assistance program appropriations for non-academic supports. These examples highlight how states have sought to allocate funding to address students' mental health needs. One challenge states have faced is finding enough qualified candidates such as social workers, counselors, school psychologists to provide the mental health services that students need. Tutoring is another popular approach that has been utilized by states and the federal government in academic acceleration efforts. Arkansas enacted legislation which created the Arkansas Tutoring Corps Act. Arkansas's act was intended to provide training to tutors and then dispatch them around the state to help local education agencies meet the capacity of tutoring services that their students needed. Tennessee enacted legislation which established the Tennessee Accelerating Literacy and Learning Corps. This legislation also was intended to provide greater access to tutors within the state of Tennessee and provide training for tutors. States and the federal government also provided guidance about best practices for the development and implementation of tutoring programs. Their guidance typically noted that tutoring should happen multiple times a week and should either occur in small groups of no more than 4 or one-on-one tutoring sessions. However, expanding tutoring programs has led to states having challenges in scaling up tutoring programs due to a lack of qualified tutors. Some research has shown that only a small portion of students that need tutoring have received full access to these tutoring programs. States have also sought to provide extending learning time opportunities. One of these popular approaches is summer enrichment opportunities. North Carolina enacted legislation which required every school district in the state to offer 6-week school extension learning recovery and enrichment programs. Local education agencies have also used ESSER funding to develop and enhance their own summer enrichment programs. Summer enrichment blends core academic instruction such as math, English, science, and the arts for part of the day, along with enrichment activities for the other part of the day. Program offerings may vary based on local education agency and schools, depending on the capacity to implement enrichment programs, student interests, along with staffing issues. And finally, expanding broadband and technology access was another strategy that states use to increase the feasibility of implementing a rapid shift to virtual learning. Colorado enacted legislation which created the Connecting Colorado Students Grant Program. This program provided funding to local education agencies to expand broadband access to students, staff, and other entities. Texas enacted legislation which provided one-time funding for reimbursements to school districts or technology acquisitions. These technology acquisitions were intended to provide one-to-one device access for students. These efforts were intended to mitigate the impacts of the homework gap by working to provide technology and internet access to all students so that they could meaningfully participate in virtual instruction. However, these efforts did not fully mitigate the reality that many students did not have an appropriate place to study, nor did it address the challenges of implementing live and asynchronous virtual instruction. And with this, I will now turn it over to my colleague, Jamie Casper, Director of the Arts Education Partnership at Education Commission of the States.
Thanks, Carlos. Hey, everybody. So nice to see you all. So nice to see familiar faces and new faces. I'm going to do a screen share here and make sure that you can see my screen as we move on. All right. So there I am. As Carlos mentioned, I'm Director of the Arts Education Partnership, which is part of Education Commission of the States. And AEP's mission is to build leadership capacity for arts and education leaders. Part of the way we do that is doing what we're doing today, providing you information about what's going on in arts education policy and practice across the country. AEP is supported by the National Endowment for the Arts and U.S. Department of Education, and we work really closely with our federal partners in our work. Today, I'll be sharing information about one of our resources related to student wellness, state ESSER plans, and then ESSER funding for the arts. So building a little bit more specifically on the things that Carlos shared with you. Last year, AEP published components of an arts education and student wellness ecosystem, which identifies policies, agencies, and actors, and then actions at the federal, state, and local levels to support student wellness. Through our juvenile justice work over the past 3 years, we found that these sectors, education, arts, health, and human services, and then juvenile justice, work primarily in silos. For example, when a child moves from a juvenile justice placement back to their home school district, there is little communication among agencies to support that child as they transition back into their community. With this resource, which Eric just popped the link to in the chat, we described how these siloed fields can work together to support young people and their wellness. The second page of the resource has specific information about policies, decision makers, and recommended actions to support student wellness. There's also a link to 10 questions for reflection and action, which guides readers to think about this information in their local contexts. Last year, our AEP team members analyzed the plans that states submitted for elementary and secondary school emergency relief, or ESSER funds. You heard Carlos use that term earlier. All 50 states, plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, had their plans approved by the U.S. Department of Education in 2022. And just as a reminder, before we dig more deeply into this work, across all three parts of ESSER, that was approximately $190 billion, 90% of those funds passed through state education agencies to local school districts. And then the state agencies were able to set aside 10% for their own use. The state plans included all of those funds, meaning their plans outlined both how they would spend, the states would spend their 10%, and how they were proposing districts would use their 90% of the funds. In our analysis, we found that 28 states and territories, or 54%, included the arts in their ESSER plans. On the map to the right, the states shaded in purple are those whose plans named the arts. So you can see there's a broad distribution across the country. In the 28 state plans that named the arts, 14, or half of them, included the arts and funding for summer and after-school programming and enrichment. 11 included the arts in their list of certification areas experiencing a critical shortage. Those states then proposed to use ESSER funds for staffing and retention in those critical shortage areas. 5 states included the arts in their plans for curriculum and instruction. Another 5 included STEAM education, or science, technology, engineering, arts, and math in their plans. 4 included the arts in teacher training and professional development, and another 4 proposed creating or expanding arts programs. And then you see there were some others. Some of the other uses included remote learning in the arts, grants or other funding for the arts, and specific safety mitigation for music programs, and then more. And Eric will hopefully put a link to our state information request where we shared this information. There you go, look at that, in the chat. These are the highlights of each state plan. However, each local education agency, or LEA, also has their own plan. All LEAs are required to post their plans online, and all the states are responsible for ensuring that those local plans are posted on the state education agency website. The U.S. Department of Education has helpfully published links to all of those state education agency compilation pages, and we'll put the link to that Department of Ed resource in the chat in just a moment. Additionally, both state and local agencies are required to continue to revise their plans as needed to adjust to emerging needs in their communities. So their plans may say one thing, and then they may need to change them as the work continues. Now, you may not know, but there are about 18,300 local education agencies across the United States, and about 13,500 of those are school districts. We were able to get access to plans from just over 6,000 school districts. So these data represent about 40% of districts across the country. Of the more than 6,000 LEAs that we have district level information for, approximately 3% of them were proposing to use ESSER funds to support arts learning. The districts who proposed to spend the highest percentage of ESSER funds on arts education include Upper Lake Unified School District in California. They were proposing to use 10.7% of their ESSER funds for the arts. And Jefferson County Schools in Alabama proposing to use 10.1% of their ESSER funding for the arts. AEP will be publishing a success story from Jefferson County within the next few months, so you'll get to read a little bit more about what they're planning to do. 14 local education agencies are proposing to use more than 5% of their ESSER funds for the arts. 51 proposed to use between 1% and 5%. 63 proposed to use some funding, but less than 1% of their ESSER funds from the arts. And then that last column, an additional 80 districts included the arts in their plans, but they didn't specify a dollar amount for spending. So again, Eric's going to put a link in chat to a blog post that we wrote about this issue. Now that we know how many states and school districts propose to use ESSER funds for arts education, I wanted to wrap up by sharing a district level success story. Our first ESSER success story focused on Houston Independent School District in Texas. The district received $1.16 billion in relief funds. And I know that seems like a lot of money, but for a point of reference, the district serves almost 195,000 students across 274 schools. Of the $1.16 billion total dollars, Houston Independent School District dedicated $22 million or 5.2% of their total funds to the district's fine arts department. And in Houston, that fine arts department includes dance, music, theater, and visual arts. One of AEP's partner organizations, Arts Connect Houston, received $735,000 of that $22 million from the fine arts department. Arts Connect Houston began in 2015 when a group of local leaders approached the district concerned about the status of arts education in the city. While there were strong programs and pockets around the district, some schools didn't offer arts education at all. And access to arts learning could vary from year to year because of changes in funding, changes in school leadership, and other factors. Arts Connect Houston now connects Houston Independent School District with the city of Houston, funders, and 89 arts and cultural organizations across the city to work toward access to arts learning for every child every year. And just a note that this $735,000 for the first year, this is the first of 3 years of funding to support 3 programs that we're going to talk a little bit more about here in a moment. Those 3 programs are Arts Action Fund, Creative Schools Institute, and the RISE Transformation Schools Initiative. The Fine Arts Department has allocated an additional $693,000 for year 2 for this work. So a little bit more about these programs that I just mentioned. The Arts Action Fund invests $250,000 annually to connect arts and culture partners in the city to in-school arts programs. The Creative Schools Institute supports principal leadership, teacher training, and programming for students. It began with 5 schools last school year, so in the 2021-22 school year. These ESSER funds are going to support expansion to an additional 5 schools during this school year. And finally, the RISE Transformation Schools Initiative is a new program linked to the broader district-wide RISE initiative to support the lowest performing schools. RISE stands for Redesign, Innovate, Support, and Empower. And $300,000 of the allocation that Arts Connect Houston received from the district will go toward this initiative. The initiative is going to provide teacher professional development, both in-school and out-of-school arts programs. And this was really interesting to me. It includes emergency funding to address immediate gaps that are preventing these schools from implementing arts programs. And the last link that Eric just dropped in chat is a link to the success story if you want to read more about it. We're going to be working on more success stories, so make sure you're signed up for AEP's mailing list to be notified when you're ready. You can find that sign up at the bottom of any page on our website, and the website is aep-arts.org. I know that I just talked your ear off, so I'm going to stop my screen share and just say thank you to you before I invite to the conversation Stacy Sanders Evans from Arts for Learning Maryland and Kimberly Washburn-Mott from the South Carolina Arts Commission. Hello, Stacy. Hello, Kimberly. All right. Well, I'm going to start by asking both of you, because now we're entering the panel portion of the discussion, the important part. Asking both of you, based on what Carlos shared and what I shared, was there something that really resonated for you in your state? Stacy, do you want to start?
Sure. I was looking to see if Maryland was one of those states that had arts as part of their plan. There were several things that came up for me. All of the things that Carlos talked about in terms of the impact on students we saw here in Maryland. I think it is interesting that where we saw states put the arts in their plans predominantly was in summer and after school. And I think to me personally, I think that speaks to the continued fight for people to see the important role that the arts play in school. As opposed to kind of pushing them into the summer and out of school time space. They need to be everywhere. We have had our greatest success here in Baltimore in the out of school time space. And then we've parlayed that into infiltrating the school day. And so, later on when we're talking about what are the results we're seeing in terms of academic recovery when we use the arts, we can speak to that and in out of school time space. I will say that the Maryland State Arts Council our State Arts Council has been amazing in providing a lot of general operating support, arts recovery support, individual artist support to make sure we can show up in as many spaces as possible, formal learning, informal, so that we can show up for our young people. And that has been super, super critical for us to have the operating capacity, for us to be able to offer the professional development for the workforce so that we can actually help students in many different areas. And as Carlos pointed out, it's not just academic recovery. It's showing up for our kids as whole human beings. And so I will leave it there.
Great. Stacey, I love that word infiltrating. All I can think of is arts ninjas, just kind of sneakily sneaking into the day. Kimberly, how about you?
Yeah, I'll sort of echo what Stacey said in that encouraging schools and school districts to use the arts in their ESSER plans has been a big part of what we've been sort of traveling around the state and letting schools and districts know that they can do that. A lot of them, that was never even presented as an option to them. So they weren't sure how to use the funding. Another thing that we're seeing is sort of capacity within the schools. So there's a lot of funding in the schools right now. As Jamie just said, there was a lot of money that went directly into school systems, and then a lot of money through ESSER that went to partners, just like the South Carolina Arts Commission and Arts Grow, which is working through some ESSER 3 funding right now. But what that doesn't solve, or what it hasn't solved, is the school's capacity to do the work. And so, we're approaching schools, and our partners are approaching schools very often and saying, hey, we want to partner with you to bring this great after school program or this great summer program, or we have these amazing things that are happening that can really help your students recover from their learning loss. And they're looking at us and saying, we just don't have the capacity to do another thing. And also we don't need the money because we have more money than we can spend right now as well. And so these are issues that we weren't necessarily expecting to happen and had not been our experience as a grant making agency in the past. We're used to people saying, yes, we want money. So, that's been a thing, but we've had to sort of shift and work on building infrastructure for sustainability. So where are the spaces that we can fund positions and not just programs? Where can we provide professional learning and support for teachers so that they will feel comfortable using the arts as a vehicle for learning? So really kind of stepping back and looking at where we can provide infrastructure support that will allow for sustainability.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks,
I will-
go ahead.
I just
Stacey.
wanted to add to that. Yeah, what we have found, the same thing too, capacity. Everybody is overwhelmed. They have too much to do and there's so much urgent need that where we have found to, where we can be the greatest value add is providing like just turnkey solutions. And so we are partnering with the district, and we take for school leaders in the district, we take all of the burden of marketing programs, enrolling students, hiring teachers, payroll, daily management, data collection. We take all of that off of school leaders, and we can essentially just provide a customized solution for them, but ultimately making sure that we understand the outcomes that they need to get, and we can deliver on those, but trying to find as little burden as possible for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Stacey, thinking about how can we not only do what's best for children, but how can we in the process take some burdens off of the adults who are trying to attend to the children so that we're meeting multiple needs. I love that. Kimberly, I'm going to come back to you. Carlos talked about learning recovery, and I want to stay with that word for a little bit. And we often talk about learning recovery in and through the arts, and I want to attend to both of those things. Can you talk a little bit about the role of partnership in learning recovery, both in the arts, recognizing that it is an important set of content areas in itself, and important learning and important skills, and then learning recovery through the arts? What's the role of partnership in supporting both of those things for young people?
Sure, and I actually have a couple slides I would love to share to that point. Let me pull those up for you. So hopefully you can all see that. Whoops, can you see it?
We can see your slides, but not the presenter view. If that's there, it flashed on and then went away again.
Okay, hold on. How about now? Anything? Slide to view, not, okay.
Yep, it's okay. If you want to just minimize the slides on the left-hand side, I think we can probably see the main slide in the main portion of the window.
Okay. My screen, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, it keeps saying Zoom quit unexpectedly. So I'm just making sure that I'm clear.
Nope, we can hear you, and we can see the presenter view now. Oh, here you are. It's all right, Kimberly. Oh, I think you're muted now.
I am so sorry. Let's see. Let me try this one more time. Hopefully it doesn't kick me out this time. Okay. You with me?
Yep, we're good now.
Okay, perfect, great. So the way that we're working through partnership is began as a partnership with the South Carolina Department of Education. And so it's the South Carolina Arts Commission, Department of Ed, serving as Arts Grow SC. We became a statewide initiative to advance arts education throughout South Carolina with some major goals. Many of you have heard me talk about this in the past, but you can see our goals here are to increase access to quality arts education, develop arts-rich learning environments, build and support infrastructure, and research and develop innovative practices. The way that we're working through partnerships specifically is as a collective impact model. So as we began to get into this partnership with the Department of Education, it became very clear very quickly that we could not have the impact that we wanted to have on our own. So we could not do all of the work, and it really needed to happen through a network of partners. And as we began to bring on these partners who were working in different ways across the state, providing services, providing professional learning, providing mental health services, a variety of things, it became clear that a collective impact model would be our best bet for sustainability. So the South Carolina Arts Commission serves as the backbone organization. And we're really all creating or carrying out mutually reinforcing activities with a shared measurement system and a common agenda. And hopefully this will be creating sustainable programs and equitable access to those sustainable programs. So partners that are working with us right now in this collective impact, you'll see some color coding here. All of our partners in pink represent our statewide partners. So these are partners that are working all over the state in all 46 counties of South Carolina and serving sort of in a very broad way. The ones listed in blue are institutions of higher education in South Carolina, and they're working in different ways, whether it be through evaluation and measurement with the University of South Carolina. Medical University of South Carolina is working on social emotional health of students through an arts therapy pilot. Winthrop University through the ABC Institute. So those are higher ed partners. And then the ones in orange are all partners that are working at a regional and local level. And so 46 counties in South Carolina, all 46 counties are receiving services either directly in the arts or professional learning to help teachers that are non-arts teachers understand how to use the arts as a vehicle for learning and for advancing learning. So I'm going to stop that. So you can see that we're using partnerships to sort of make the work have greater impact across the entire state, and specifically in the arts by providing direct grants, but also providing services to make sure that arts teachers have the supplies that they need, like instruments or like art materials or things that they might need access to be able to teach in a high quality way. And then through the arts, primarily with professional learning to help non-arts teachers understand what really high quality arts integration in the classroom looks like.
Thanks, Kimberly. And you tied that together so nicely. I just want to highlight it. Carlos talked about one of the pieces of feedback that they found from arts educators was a lack of supplies that was affecting students in the classroom. And then you were just talking about in South Carolina, you know, there was a targeted initiative to use some of those funds to provide those materials. So that was a really nice like data point from a larger survey, and then South Carolina stepping in and using that funding. Stacy, same question to you about partnerships. What's the role of partnership in addressing learning recovery in and through the arts?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll specifically talk about the work that we are doing around in summer learning. In Baltimore City, there's a partnership with the Baltimore City's district office. And essentially they are wanting to provide a 6-week intervention that initially was about stemming summer learning loss, but now is about academic recovery. And we actually employ about 400 people to support our young people during the summer. And that's about 2,500 students pre-K through 6th grade. About 120 of those people are community artists, and those 120 community artists partner with certified teachers from the city school system. So every student in the program is receiving 3 hours of arts integrated literacy and math every single day. And it's collaboratively conceived of and taught by a teaching artist and teacher pair. On top of that, we have tons of partnerships with cultural organizations, community-based groups who come in the afternoon and provide enrichment opportunities. And then we also do field trips out into the community. So there are a number of partnerships within that ecosystem that create the opportunities for young people. Now, just for those folks that aren't actually operating at that scale, I just kind of want to take it back, because that is like us counting to 10, right? But many years ago, probably 12 years ago, it was a much different environment. The Baltimore City Schools was, looking at summer learning loss. They saw the research, they knew they needed to create more opportunity for young people, and they were, specifically focused on kids who were struggling in math and how could they get them to come to a 5-week program, particularly if they're struggling in math, right? Like, how are you going to get them to come there? And so they're like, we gotta hook them with something. And so arts was one of the things that they wanted to hook them with. So they kind of disguised it like it was going to be this fun thing. And it was a fun thing. And young audiences, that was our name at the time. We provided all of the arts pieces. And so there were partnerships with artists. And what we found was that kids really did love the arts piece, right? And they showed up for that, but then they might go home. They weren't as engaged in the math piece. So the district became concerned about that intervention because they didn't see the needle move. And so about 7 years ago, we convinced them to just give us one site. We said, give us the one site because we want to try the math differently. We believe that artists can help conceive of like that curriculum and that instruction in a more engaging way. And we believe summer should look like that. And so we did just start with one site. But the important thing is, as we're thinking about this, is like, we need to think about what matters and what we want to measure and make sure we're doing that, because every year we measure those things. We report back to all the partners about whether we're moving the needle or not. Some years we don't move them in all the places, but we're always learning and growing and bringing our community together to figure it out. And artists are the greatest problem solvers. So the other piece I want to just pick up around partnerships in this is that the Maryland State Arts Council, Arts Education in Maryland Schools Alliance, and Young Audiences invested in a statewide artist training program for 10 years. There were 180 community artists who went through this professional development program, and it essentially created the workforce, not just for summer, but for in school. And so I just think, as you know, we have our arts councils here, and they play such an important role in making sure that our artists, can be a part of the workforce to help our young people, whether it's out of school time or in school.
Great. Stacey, I'm going to ask you an unscripted question, so I apologize in advance, but
That's
I know so you were mentioning 12 years ago, what that program looked like. And I know that the program looks very different. I know Arts for Learning's work looks very different than it did 12 years ago. In your perspective, from your perspective, what did it take to build partnerships with organizations and people that you weren't working with 12 years ago?
What I think is different about us now is like we're explicitly a learning organization. That's how we define ourselves. And I think 12 years ago, we would have defined ourselves as an arts organization. And I'm not saying like, we're an education organization now. I think we're broader, like we're a learning organization. So whenever we're bringing people together, it's really about learning, right? And I think that's what assessments are for. They're not for the students, they're for the adults to understand what we need to do better for our kids. And so I think that's one thing that's a little bit different about us and how we move in the space. I think the other thing too that we, as we're operating these programs, I've got to be honest, like most of the artists who are working in like our summer space are not actually like the artists on our traditional roster, the people who know young audiences know, like 70 years of these exclusive rosters. And so our relationships had to look different in order for us to be able to scale up. And to be honest, we had to look at a completely different workforce than what we had. And so like the adults needed to learn too, in order to show up differently. So I don't know if that answers your question, if that's like too philosophical, but.
No, I think that's great. Yeah. Thanks for that. Kimberly, can I ask you the same question? What you showed us that slide that had a very long list of partners from lots of different sectors and lots of different levels. What had to happen to build those partnerships?
I think first strategic thinking and planning about what the impacts we wanted to make on learning in and through the arts in South Carolina. So we had to really think with the end in mind. Where are we going? How are we going to be able to make this happen? And then started to make connections with people that were either already working in those spaces, that were already doing some of this work, or people that maybe hadn't even thought about how the arts could connect with what they were already doing. And I think being willing to have conversations with people and just say, we don't know where this could go, but what are your thoughts about this? And just sort of brainstorm together how we could maybe come together for impact in our state. And more often than not, I think we left those meetings with a plan for how to move forward. And then oftentimes those people were like, you know who else you need to talk to? This person over there, or I know somebody in Oconee County that might be interested in this program. And so especially as we're trying to move throughout all areas of the state, especially our very rural areas that are hard to get into, there's just no replacement for personal contact and talking with people, just really getting out there and letting people know what we want to do. And people have been excited and have been willing to get on board with us. So we're excited about that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both. Eric, I think we're going to transition to Q&A. And I know you've got a couple of questions queued up.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, I do. Actually, I have a couple questions related specifically to teachers. I think we touched a little bit on this. We had a really good question come in early on from Leah from Louisiana. Have any states addressed pandemic learning recovery by addressing teachers' mental health? And this could be Jamie, Carlos, Stacy, whoever might know.
Carlos, do you have any information about that? I know ECS has published a couple of resources recently.
I know one strategy that states have done is allowed teachers to use mental health days for, allow teachers to have excused absence for mental health days. That's also been done for students as well. I feel like a lot of the focus in mental health has been on the student side of things. Well, I think we also should acknowledge that teachers' mental health is equally important because they're the ones who are providing this, who are providing the academic and social emotional supports to their students as well.
Yeah, I love that question. I think I responded to that in the chat, and there's actually something that I'm going to be speaking at a conference at the U.S. Department of Education on Friday about sort of related to that. And so it's connected to Arts for Learning. Maryland has a EIR grant with the U.S. Department of Education that's actually looking at this model we're doing in summer, but that we're pushing into the school day in Prince George's County. And we're looking at, does this collaborative partnership between teaching artists and teachers impact student achievement during the school day? And so the design, the evaluation design is really looking at students, right? Student achievement, student wellness. But what we found in this planning year is really, it's been this incredible lifeline to teachers. And so we're actually looking at, can we redesign the evaluation to really look at that? Now, it's not specifically, addressing mental health, but I feel like it's really connected to mental health. And so, so the presentation we're looking at, or that we're presenting on, is like, are we measuring the right thing? Are we really measuring the right thing here? Because I think the artists and the artistic, that process, I think, could be something that could be a lifeline for teachers. And what is our role in that?
Yeah, I think I have the other question kind of follows up on that a little bit, Stacy. The question's, with teacher capacity already being strained prior to the pandemic, are there any measures being taken, nationally or in states to assist them with the additional workload or the additional stressors? Basically they're being asked to do a lot to help with this gap, either as teaching artists or teachers in schools. are states taking a hand in trying to address that or help out in some way?
So I
You-
think
Oh, go ahead,
Stacey.
Jamie.
I was
No,
gonna
you go ahead.
say, how about I'll start and then maybe turn it over to you. So ECS has been doing quite a bit of work in the teacher retention space, which is kind of the umbrella that this falls under. And oops, that was the wrong link. Hang on. I'll keep clicking through and getting the right links as I turn it over to others. But there are some things that we're thinking of when it comes to retention. We've got a couple of, not at the state level, but at the school district level, we've got a couple of districts that are experimenting with shorter work weeks. And really thinking through what are the requirements for hours in school for children, what are the requirements for work hours for teachers, and how do we match those to a shorter work week so that people have a longer weekend to recover and come back to the classroom refreshed. So that is a strategy that, again, happening at the district level, not necessarily at the state level. Stacey, I know you had something to add, and I'll look for those links that I wanted to pop in the chat.
I'm on a teacher pipeline, retention committee here in Baltimore, and I don't, honestly, I think that the struggle is real. We're just seeing a lot of teachers leave. We're seeing a lot more focus on trying to recruit conditionally certified teachers, and then how do we support those teachers? What I've been trying to get the district to understand is we have to figure out ways to create community. The arts are the best way to create community. We have to find supports provided in the school day. I think having artists come in and support in planning and ideation and observing and feedback and, all of those things. I just think that we can be we can help breathe joy back into teaching and help teachers reconnect to why they entered the field and help keep them there. I think that is like for us, that's like something we're really noodling on as a learning organization. We're like, we think this is the next thing. Like, how can we help with this? We know the artists can be a solution there. One thing, Eric, I forgot, we actually do have evidence that shows that the arts integration model that we have and the artists and teachers who are working together have boosted academic recovery and math between the end of year assessments and beginning of year assessments in Baltimore. So I can drop those slides in before people hop off. It's just really good data. So if you guys are looking for data to help convince that the arts and no other program in Baltimore was able to achieve academic recovery. And there's lots of other academic interventions out there, but none of them were the arts. So anyway, if it's good data for your own infiltrations, I will share it.
That would be great, Stacey. And I can also share it after the fact with some resources up on our website so that people have access to it after. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question for Kimberly before I let you all go. Kimberly, I had the question come in. It said that the work you guys are doing in South Carolina is great. But without such an infrastructure of partnerships and long-term planning, is there anything that you think that State Arts Agency can do to support the ongoing work of learning and recovery right now with the resources they have aside from that longer term strategy?
Sure. So, we do offer some grants directly related to learning loss to the agency. So if you're looking to go that traditional grant making route that state arts agencies often use, grants that target learning recovery would be an option. I think investing in teacher professional learning is one of the biggest things that we can do to address learning recovery. Giving teachers strategies to use the arts as a vehicle for learning can be a very, very powerful tool. So I would suggest that as well. The other thing that we're doing, and yes, we did start with, you can do a lot of things with funding, and that's one thing we started with Arts Grow SC was some ESSER funding that made a lot of this beginning work possible. But one of the challenges we're facing right now is sustainability and how do we continue these programs. And this might be a good sort of starting point for people who are looking to begin or grow this work, is thinking about what types of data you need to begin collecting to start to request that type of funding. So we're actively looking at ways that we're measuring success in addressing learning recovery. We're looking at things like program evaluability. So what can be measured in these programs, and can we actually make a direct correlation between what we see and what we're claiming is actually happening? And thinking about research that we can do now that will lay the groundwork for future funding that can continue the work. So I think anytime you want to accomplish something big, there is some level of strategic planning that is going to happen. It may not happen quickly, but as long as every step that you're taking is a step down that strategic pathway that you've laid for yourself, then it's the correct step to continue moving towards. I don't know if that was a thorough answer, but
No, that was great.
how we would do it.
We're a little over 4 o'clock, so I don't want to take up anyone else's time. I know every single person on this call is super busy, but I do want to thank you all so much for presenting and being here. Carlos, Jamie, Kimberly, Stacy, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, and thank you everyone else for hanging in there.